Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an excellent game to share with you from the Americas Continental Chess Championship 2024. This was a final round game between 10-year-old Argentine prodigy Faustino Oro, FIDE Master, rated 2351, and Grandmaster Georg Meier, rated 2607. Now in this event, Faustino secured his second of 3 International Master norms, and gained 48 rating points, which means he is now only 1 International Master norm away and 1 rating point away from, in his case, becoming the youngest International Master ever. Now, this game here is one I would describe as a model game against the French defense out of this advanced French defense variation. An invasive e5 pawn on board. A big reason for Black's defeat in this one doesn't come up with an active enough plan. This active plan I'm referring to is one involving the f-pawn. For many moves in this game, it's suggesting either f5, trying to shut down the Kingside, or even challenging this e5 pawn head-on. Neither occurs. So what's going to happen in this one? We see this slow build-up by Faustino on the Kingside. It's this one positional improvement after another, and then all of a sudden, one tactic drops on the Kingside and blasts open the king position. All right, from here on this move 6, we continue with bishop e2. Why isn't the bishop instead deployed to this more active d3 square? Well, it's because of this continuation here, where Black can now pinpoint d4. And what do you do about that now as White? You back off the bishop. Well, you run into knight b4. If you try and avoid this exchange with bishop b3, it's even worse for White. There'd be a problem on d3. Okay. In this game, because of this continuation here, queen b6 and the pressure on d4, White opts for the less active, but at least more stable post for the bishop. The bishop stays out of the way of the queen. Okay, let's get some more developing moves in here. And really the first think in this game is on this move 10 by White. He goes with bishop g5, about 10 minutes spent on this move. We're going to see soon enough why some time was spent on this move 10. Had to calculate one key line. It runs as follows after queen b6, knight a4, addressing the pressure against d4. 3 attackers were on it. Queen is kicked away to a5. The bishop now falls back to d2. If you don't bother the queen right away, there can be these tricks where the knight captures on d4 or e5 and unleashes the bishop on the a4 knight. So important to disrupt that queen. Bishop d2 it is. Bishop b4, dark square bishop exchange. And this is essentially the position, one of the key positions Faustino had to foresee before playing bishop g5, because in this position right here, there's now only one move for White, and it is a3, kicking away the queen from observing the d4 square. Otherwise, the d4 pawn would fall. In the game, it is queen to e7. This is the best move. If you go elsewhere, the only other square that's available without being captured right away, you'd simply be running into b4 with tempo. And this is a desirable move, increasing this nice grip over the c5 square. So in this one, it is queen e7 straight away. And the follow-up here is knight to c3. If instead you look at this position as, okay, let me connect rooks with queen to d2, there's a tactic against the a4 knight. Knight takes e5 is there, and there's a problem with the unprotected knight. So White pretty much says, okay, mission accomplished. My knight came there just to kick the queen away from observing d4. Let's get back in the ballgame. Knight c3 it is. Note, white is not moving forward here. Knight c5, there's a flaw with this move. Black could continue with knight takes on d4, and this removes the defense of the c5 knight. So if you take like this, queen gets the knight here, black has one pawn. Any other continuation, if in this position knight takes bishop, black would first insert knight takes knight with check, and only then recapture. Black is up a pawn. So knight c5, not a good idea. Knight c3 instead. And a6 rules out any knight b5 ideas. This is a sensitive square, d6. From here, queen d2, kingside castles. More defense over d4. This does free up the queen to go elsewhere. At first glance, rook a d1 may come across as maybe a bit on the passive side. You know, why are we just babysitting a pawn rather than trying to compete for this only open file? In a way, I think rook a d1 is, the deeper view at least, is that it's actually an aggressive move. Reason being, white is not so willing to create exchanges, not so willing to exchange major pieces. White's still looking to pursue an attack on the king's side, so wants to keep more pieces on board. All right, from here we have knight a7. So this plan by black, the computer's not such a fan of it. I want to draw some attention to this move 17. Here's what the computer wants to go with. It says, bring the queen back home. Why? The short answer, vacate e7. If black tries to challenge e5 right now, there's a problem. The problem is that as soon as f6 is in, the queen no longer sees h4 directly, and white would be able to play g4. Where's this knight go? It would have to go to the edge. And now white can take on f6. You take with the pawn, you would hang a knight. You take with the rook, you're looking at possible forks here. It's an uncomfortable situation to be sure for black. By first playing queen to d8 and then f6, how is it different? Well, playing g4 now would not be good for white because the knight can simply go to e7, and this game could easily turn in black's favor. This file will open up, the rook will have access to these holes on the f-file, and so too will the knight. All of these squares are super sensitive all of a sudden in white's camp. So it wants to play with f6, but first it suggests queen to d8. f6 never happens. Instead, black focuses on the b5 square. With this move, pressure is released on d4. This gives white a moment to now relocate the bishop to a much more active square. From here, bishop b5, knight takes bishop, knight takes knight, and queen f4, the very best, defending d4 directly, and also ruling out any knight h4 ideas. Queen's on that one. Also, there's a problem currently on f5. That's addressed with queen d7. Defending with the g6 is certainly scary, creating these two dark square weaknesses. Bishop takes knight ideas, queen h6, knight g5. Okay, in this game, queen d7, and now follow up h4. So there's a couple ideas behind this h-pawn advance after h6, h5. This is the first one I look at. Now that h6 and h5 is in, this square is super sensitive in black's camp. Black has weakened g6 by playing h6, and white has strengthened g6 by playing h5. All of a sudden, there's this idea for white to form a battery on this diagonal, with this pawn having a grip over g6, put the bishop on b1, get the queen on d3, and then eventually get into that h7 square. There's always this final committal move to pry open that diagonal g4, scare the knight away, and then there you go. Queen on h7 for mate. This is one idea white could shoot for. There's one other idea available to white now that this h-pawn is on h5 rather than h2. We'll see what that is soon enough. From here, knight e7, centralize the rook, and from here we have knight a7. Relocating the knight, it is especially clumsy on b5. This is one of the last chances for black to try and get going with this f-pawn. I totally understand why this f-pawn is not being played in this situation. If you do play with the f-pawn, whether it be f6 or f5, it's recommending a capture. Why not play in this way as black? Well, all of a sudden there'd be a hole now on e5, a backward pawn, another hole on g6. This is an especially weak square, but this is the way the computer wants to play. It says this is the active best chance of survival to play in this way. At least a new square is opened up for the queen rook to maybe do something along the f-file. If we look at the open c-file, by the way, in this position right here, the rook is on an open file, but what exciting thing can it do on the c-file? Where's its nice forward move? Not here, not there, or this one, or that one. All the advanced squares are covered really nice here with the pawns on dark, bishop on light. Okay, we continue here with knight a7, knight h2. So this is the other idea that is available to white because this h-pawn is all the way up here on h5, or just off of, in this case, the h2 square. We have this nice knight maneuver. Knight h2 into g4. Knight f5, simple way to defend d4, bishop b1, and from here we have knight c to e7. Pop quiz, what move would you play here? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, incoming the very best move, and that is knight f6. This is a beautiful tactic. This is prying open the black kingside. This is a super valuable g-pawn. You have to take the knight. And it's all of a sudden replaced with not just any pawn, what I might describe here as a 3-point pawn. Don't just go anywhere, knight. In the game, knight g6 is played. If you try and hang on to the material, this pawn is going to kill you. Bishop takes knight, queen g3, queen g7, game over. Super dangerous f6 pawn. So black tries to hold it together, at least shelters the king along the g-file. Pawn takes knight, pawn takes pawn. After the smoke clears on these forceful moves, what can we say? White's up a pawn and has the much safer king. This is completely lost for black, but there are still ways you can go wrong. Follow up, rook takes rook, queen takes rook, rook d3, and from here black captures on b2. There is no rook c1, keep in mind, queen still has that covered, and if black tries something aggressive, for instance, queen e1 check and then rook c1, trying for this guy falls. Follow up, rook here, rook there, wherever the king goes. So the queen, the black queen, has a responsibility. Rook b2 in this game. Follow up, rook h3, looking at the checks on the h7, h8 squares. Rook b1 check, king h2, queen d6, pop quiz. How would you defend against this check? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, this is a way white can go wrong. The best move, the move played in the game, f4. If you instead play g3, Black can return to f6, covering the important checks over here, h8 square, and targeting f2. And if you come over like this, all of a sudden it's considered an equal position, rook b3. Looking at queen f3 check, follow up queen takes f2, rook b1. This is considered an even position all of a sudden. Also, if you're playing g3 here, another way to look at it is that this guy in h3 all of a sudden becomes one-dimensional, just functioning along the file. f4, the rook remains free along the third rank. This plays an important role. After queen f6, the rook swings over to c6, now looking to enter on rank 7 or 8. This rook is simply not going to be around to provide any defense. In the game, we have queen to d6. If black tries something different here, for instance, queen f5, stopping not only rook c8 check, but also threatening to exchange queens with queen h5, landing a fork, white really wouldn't have anything better than to return back to h3. And I imagine white would then say to himself, okay, if it's not going to work along this file, I'll just try the other one. In general, it probably is best to first try to pinpoint the king from a distance. The reason I say this is because trying to do it along this file, there's always these ideas to meet a check with the counterpunch against the rook. In this particular case, it really wouldn't matter. White would have a nice follow-up forceful move working on the f8 square. But in this game, doesn't matter. Black does not try queen to f5. It is instead queen d6. White continues with the check on c8, king f7, and just one more move. Rook c7 check, black resigns. What are you supposed to do? If you take the rook, there's a skewer, and you lose the queen. What other options does black have? King here, checkmate in 1. King here, checkmate in 2. There's another checkmate in 1. King here, that's mate. And the last one, king here, we have a check and another check. The queen will soon fall, and not long after, the black king. So, what did you think of this one? Anyhow, feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.